Hey everyone, this is the second in a series of videos that I'm making on batteries and connectors for your 2S micro drones. And again, I'm doing this because I've gotten so many questions from you guys, and I want to put out a bunch of information at once, answer some of those questions, and give you some ideas. Hopefully you'll see that you've actually got a bunch of options when it comes to 2-cell batteries, what batteries to use, how to mount them, how to run the wires, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to show you the Beta75X first, and I'm going to show you all of the 2-cell batteries that I currently have that fit on the frame without modification. And then I will show you how I modify the frame with a strap so that I can hold all the other batteries that wouldn't normally fit. And there's some really powerful batteries. There's reasons you might do that or not do that. We'll go over that. And then I'm going to show you a couple other builds. This is the 75 Pro frame. This is the frame that I used for my first 2S Whoop. That video is here on this channel. I know a lot of you have seen it, but this frame is increasingly popular for do-it-yourselfers because it holds these 8mm motors so nicely. So we'll talk about that. And then I've got the Beta65X as promised. I'll show you how I mount batteries on that. And the 65 Pro, that's another option. So I've got a whole stack of frames here to show you and a whole table full of batteries. So I hope this is helpful. Let's get started. Alright, so let's start with the 75X. This is the build that I flew in the last race, and you can see it has already been modified with my little strap down here. I'll show you more about that. But first, here is an unmodified frame and the battery compartment. This is approximately 12mm by 16mm this way. I say approximately because the material is flexible and it can actually hold a variety of slightly different battery sizes. So I'm just going to show you the batteries that fit. Let's start with the 300 milliamp-hour batteries. These are all of the ones that I currently have that are 300 milliamp-hour and fit the Beta75X frame without modification. This one is the Beta FPV battery. Many of you probably got this with your 75X bind and fly. The nice thing about this is that it comes with an XT30 connector, just like the 75X. All of these other ones ship with the red JST connector. So if you want to use any of these batteries, you're going to have to either replace the connectors like I did on each battery, or replace the pigtail on your drone with a red JST. I know a number of people have done that and they swear it flies great. They're not wrong. I had the red JST on my original 2S Whoop and I loved it. But I did get a lot of voltage sag under heavy load, and if you use a lot of high throttle, the XT30 does help with that. Now this battery is still available at a number of vendors right now, but it has been discontinued. They've decided to replace it with a 350 milliamp-hour battery. I don't have that yet, but I presume it's similar cross-section and just a little bit longer and just a little bit heavier. This is the 45C battery by Tattoo and the 45C battery by Pulse. These two batteries are very similar to each other, both in physical characteristics and in performance. And then these three are the Turnigy Nanotech batteries. We've got the 35C, 45C, and the new 70C battery. Now I'll be comparing the performance of all of these in a future video. Right now we're just talking about the fit and using them on the various drones. And they certainly all do fit. Any of these batteries will slide in just like this and do just fine that way. Now there is one unfortunate surprise in the 300 milliamp-hour category, and that is this Tattoo battery. You can see these both say 300 milliamp-hour 45C. They're both by Tattoo, but these two batteries are not the same. This one is longer, it's wider, it's heavier, and it does not fit in the frame. It's close, but it does not fit. So I mention these. I mention this because these two versions do exist out there. Some of you may have heard me say that I got this from Amazon. That was a mistake. I actually got it from Diablo Hobbies. I'm not sure how long Clinton had it in his warehouse, but I have heard from other people online that they've also received this larger battery from other vendors. So it's out there. I asked Tattoo about it, and they sent me this. This is the one that does fit in the frame, and they tell me this represents the current product. So hopefully if you order one today, you'll be getting one of these and not one of these. There's also a big difference in performance. This battery is pretty terrible. If you get one of these larger ones, I suggest you return it. So what about the larger batteries? These are the ones that I have. 400 milliamp hour max amps. Let's see, these four are all 450 milliamp hour. We got the Beta FPV, Tattoo, Crazy Pony, and GMB. The Tattoo is 75C. These other ones claim an 80C rating. And then we've got 550 GMB if you really want to go big, and this is a 500 Airblade. I included this just as an example of a very different battery shape. Of these batteries, there is only one that actually fits in the frame without modification that I have. There may be other batteries out there, of course, but these are the ones that I have. And this 450, it's a little snug, but snug is good, and it fits right in there. So if you're looking for a 450 size battery that just fits in this frame, there it is, Tattoo 450. Now, why would you want to use a battery this large on a 2S Swoop? Doesn't that make the drone really heavy? And the answer is yes, it adds weight. And I'll go over the exact weight of these in a different video. But it also adds a lot of power, especially the 450 milliamp hour batteries. These are super powerful. You will hear the difference. Your motors will just absolutely scream. I made a video, I was showing this Crazy Pony battery. This GMB battery is also awesome. If you like to race around on maximum throttle and you want to be able to fly maximum throttle non-stop for as long as you want, that's where these big batteries come in. And of course they will also give you more flight time. But if you're pulling out of dives and doing a lot of acrobatics, then the weight may work against you. So you've got options to consider. So this one fits and the other ones don't. So how would we fit these ones on here? So my solution is, where'd my frame go, is to cut just the bottom part of this frame off, leaving the sidewalls, and you can see that here. There you go. I like to leave the sidewalls because they help keep that battery in place, and then you just strap it in. This is a Velcro cable tie, and it's going to go like that. Let's grab one of these batteries. Squeeze it in between those sidewalls. Put this through, and then you just want to pull it nice and tight and fold it down, and there you go. That is pretty darn secure, and it'll hold that battery in like that. Now the straps that I'm using look like this. They come in a roll. This used to be a much larger roll. I bought this a long time ago from a local hardware store, but you just peel them off like this, and you've got the little loophole for it to go through. These are going to be much longer than you need, but you can trim it to the appropriate size. These are called Velcro Cable Ties, and they're designed for tidying up computer cables and that sort of thing. But they work really well for this purpose because they are so thin and lightweight. When you pull them apart, they're easy to pull apart, but this direction, they're actually incredibly strong. I have never had one of these break or come unvelcroed in flight. I've had batteries slide that way. I'll talk about that in a second. But these straps are great. If you're worried about weight, you can also trim down the thickness in here. It does not need to be this full width in order to give you that kind of strength. It just needs the width where it connects in order to get enough Velcro sticking. So you can see I've done that here. This strap gets pretty narrow as it goes under the ESC and up to this side, and then it gets wide again in order to make that connection here. I took this out of my build a while back and took a picture, so here's what it looks like, and you can see the dimensions if you want to do the same kind of thing. So what if you're flying along and you get into a hard crash and your battery starts to slip out like this? It could go either direction. That's something that could happen on the original frame or with this strap. I actually had that happen at the last race in practice, and I finished up a couple laps flying around like this. That feels really weird if that's never happened to you. So how do you prevent that? Well, My friend Lonnie actually hooked me up with a tiny piece of UMA grip, and that totally solved my problem for the race, so I'll show you that first. Here it is, just a small section. I use this on my larger quads, but just a little piece of it right down in here, and then the battery can go on top of that. It's going to stick up just a tiny bit more than before, but that's okay because we have this adjustable strap. And we can get it nice and tight in here. And now that is not going anywhere. That is super secure. I really like this solution. It adds a tiny bit of weight and it makes the battery stick up a tiny bit more. But it's one solution that can work for all my battery sizes, and that's pretty nice. Another option is that you can do the same trick that I showed in my original 2S Whoop video. You can get something that's going to bump up like Velcro, not to stick it to Velcro, but just to straddle the two sides. So if you've got the Velcro in here, this is about 2.5 centimeters apart. One of them is going to hit here to stop, one of them is going to hit here to stop, and it's going to go in. And then once it's strapped in tight, that will also give you a blocker to keep it from sliding out. Alright, next let's talk about the wires. When you put your battery in, you can put it this way. You've seen me doing that. Or you can put it this way. And I've seen people do it that way. And I think Beta FPV must expect you to do it this way, judging on the length of the cords that they give you. You'll see my pigtail is much shorter than the default. The default is much longer and it can wrap around like that. I have tried flying that way and I just do not like it. There's a couple reasons why I don't like it. One reason is because when I set it this way, these cords always end up sticking down and they make it not lie flat. I like to be able to set it down and have it lie flat, but when they're strapped in, I seem to have problems with that. Also, can you see it right now? Yes, you can, which means it is blocking the airflow from this propeller. Even when I tie it in as tight as I can, it's still blocking that airflow a little bit, and that's another problem. It's also imbalancing the quad because you're putting all this weight, and remember, this is going to be your heaviest wire gauge in the whole thing because it's your main power lead. It's all going to be off to one side, and not only is the weight off center when you do that, but your thrust is going to be imbalanced because you're going to be blocking thrust more on one side than the other. I have seen cases where these whoops might wash out only when turning one direction or the other, and it turned out to be an imbalance in thrust between the two. And so I don't know if these wires alone would cause that, but I would rather not have the wires running to the side. I would rather have them in the back. So to have it in the back, with the default pigtail, you then have a new problem. The issue with having it in the back is that this has to come and turn around and plug into here, and there's not a lot of space to do that. And one of the reasons it's difficult is because all the battery manufacturers that give you XT30 connectors seem to do this. There is an enormous amount of heat shrink on here, and that's fine if this wire was going to continue to be straight, but you can see where it creases down here. This part is completely inflexible. So if you took that and then you added the other end of the connector with an equally inflexible piece here, you're going to end up making this awkward triangle shape in the back, and it's hard to get that straight. It might stick to the side and block your airflow anyway. I don't like that. And you can see the ones like these came with the red JST, so I had to replace them, and it's got really short heat shrink in there, which means you can flex much closer to the wire. What I suggest for this is that you actually trim the heat shrink back. You can slide a knife in here, or small scissors like this. You can see I've actually already started this one. Get it to bump out a little bit, trim it off, pull out the other side, trim that like so. So now that that's done and it can flex the way that I want, it can reach my pigtail, which is buried under here. Just pinch it with these two fingers, hook it around, plug it in like so. There you go. Makes a nice short loop here. that's going to use a lot less wire than routing it around the other way, and it hooks in like that. I much prefer these very short connections for that reason. It's still not perfect though. Look how this is sticking over here and blocking one side. That's partly how it just emits from this battery, and you could try to bend the wires straight, but there is another option. The thing that's nice about having an adjustable strap on here is that if you want to, you can choose to rotate the battery 90 degrees. Let me strap that in for you. There we go. It's not quite centered, but you can see how that goes like that. That is going to lower your center of mass just a tiny bit, but I find that doesn't bother me. My rates aren't super high, and what you get in the back is like this, and now instead of going sideways and around, it's going bottom to top. So now this is going to plug in just like this, and the loop is oriented that way, which means when you look down from above, the wires are completely out of the prop line all the time. Now, a lot of these battery manufacturers provide more than one shape for their batteries. These are the long variants of the batteries, and I really like these for 2S whoops because of mounting, like you just saw. But what if you had a battery like this Airblade battery, very different size? I would not recommend this for a 2S whoop just because of the shape, but maybe you already have batteries like this. They wouldn't have to be this extremely flat, but something that wouldn't naturally fit in the tray. What would you do with that? Obviously, you could strap it in this way if your strap was a little bit longer, but that would be pretty cumbersome. That could come undone. I wouldn't recommend that. If you did need to mount a battery that didn't fit between the sidewalls, what I would do then is cut the sidewalls off completely and just strap it in without them. You would definitely want something like a little piece of UMA grip in there if you were going to do that. And if you didn't have these sidewalls, you might actually want to orient the battery this way instead of this way. Under the battery tray is the receiver tray, and you can actually run your strap through the receiver tray and do it this way. I haven't tried that for myself, but I heard from one of the guys from a Spokane FPV. They're all running the Beta75X, that's their spec class for this winter, and Max Amps is also in Spokane, so they've got a bunch of batteries like this, and I've heard that that's how they do it. They stick them on this way and run the strap like that, and then hook the wire around. I'm not exactly sure how they run the wire, but there are other options like that. Alright, so all of that was on the Beta75X. Let's look at another frame. I think it'll go a little faster now because they're mostly similar. This is the Beta75 Pro frame. It was designed originally for 703 brushless motors, but I've got it here with a 2S flight controller stack and the 802 motors, 17,500 kV. This is basically Beta65X parts on a 70mm frame with 40mm props. This sort of build can be super fun. It has way more punch than the Beta75X, it has more thrust, and it's lighter, and it corners faster, and you might need a throttle curve or something because you're going to smack into the ceiling. Otherwise, this kind of build can be pretty awesome. If you really push it outside, warm motors and batteries is a thing to watch out for, but it's pretty awesome. I wish I could fly this more and tune it up and get a bunch more info. Unfortunately, the flight controller in here died, and I'm waiting for a replacement. So I may give you more information on that in the future, but let's look at the batteries. Here you can see this lead, very, very similar. Here you can see I've got a strap, very similar. And on this frame, there is plenty of room for the strap to go under the ESC around the battery tray. The battery walls are a little lower than on the 75X, but you just cut off that bar and you can put any old 2-cell battery you want in there like that or like that. One thing that doesn't fit under here with the ESCs is your receiver. So the receiver for this build is actually under the canopy, and if you look closely you can see the antenna wire coming down there, and then I've got it just taped on the back. So you do have to put the receiver up top, but there's plenty of room for that. If you want to make a build like this, really the only mod you have to do to the frame is have a way to attach your batteries. And then, let's see, where's a clean frame? Here is one of the frames. The only other thing you have to do is on the back side, which is right here, half of this circle has to be cut off, and then the ESC can just sit right down in there like that. This is the same kind of frame I used on my original 2S Swoop, but I had to drill these out for the 11mm motors. It works out way nicer with the 8mm motors. And just for interest, here it is. That's the frame from my original 2S Whoop, aka lawnmower. It got pretty broken and dirty over time. This frame is not as sturdy as the 75X frame, but it's pretty sturdy, and a build like this can be really light, so that helps with durability too. Next up, the Beta65X. Here is an unmodified frame holding the two 1S batteries. I really like the 2x1S setup for practical reasons and because of the weight. If I was making a build that was designed only to fly indoors or in small spaces, I might even still use the 2x1S setup for that, mainly because of the weight. I would just want to make sure I get a really good quality connector on there to get the most performance that I can. But here is the build the way that it's supposed to be designed, and you can see already one of the things that is kind of unfortunate. You can see quite a bit of battery showing through here. These props are so small, they can only produce so much thrust over such an area. It's a shame to have the batteries blocking even that small space. It would be better for airflow if the two batteries are stacked on top of each other, more like you see in the Mobula 7, although that would of course change the center of weight a little bit. The flat surface is really nice for just landing on the ground, so there's trade-offs there. But if you want to put a 2-cell battery on one of these, you got to figure out how to do it. Now, if I put an ESC in there, you can see that there is no space between these motor plugs and the frame itself. And so that means that we're not going to be able to run a strap around it that way like we did on the other builds. I'll show you in a minute how I dealt with that. But this is actually a much cleaner solution that I just found out about. This is something you can print on Thingiverse. It was designed as a 2S battery holder for the Mobula 7 frame, but I've recently learned that it also works on the Beta65X frame. Here is a picture. This was contributed by Tommy Fox, so thanks. And you can see it just hooks into the underside of the tray and holds the battery. And the shape of it is just like the shape of the 75X battery tray. And again, the only thing you lose in doing this is the space for the receiver. So you've got to put the receiver up in the top like I showed you in that last build. If I was building one now and I had access to a 3D printer, that's probably what I would do. It's a lot cleaner than the solution that I actually did. Alright, so the first thing I did was I cut out this center bar so that this just went all the way across and there was a gap in the middle. I tried bending this out to see if I could shove a battery in there, and it was close. It didn't quite fit, and it kind of distorted the shape of the whole frame in like this, so I didn't like that. Although I did see online somebody, I forget who it was, melted this part of the frame in order to change the shape of it, and they were able to stick, I think it was the MyLipo 333 battery in there, and so that was an option that worked for them. I didn't want to melt it, so I just cut the material and then folded the sides down in. And you can actually see that build right here. So I cut and folded these down in, and then over the top I put a hole through on both sides and tied a knot. This in the center is actually a hair tie. Hair ties are an awesome building material for whoops actually. They're like little bungee cords. They stretch like rubber bands, but they hit the end of their stretching limit and they just don't break. That was actually enough to hold the battery in, but I found that it was coming loose in crashes, so I did add these little straps. I can't fit one strap through here because of those motor plugs, but there are room for two little straps like that. So there it is with a battery. Now these little straps are a little bit harder to work with because it doesn't loop through itself, but what I do is just hold it with one finger, pull tight, and strap it over. do the same thing with this one. Hold it with one finger, pull the slack out, and strap it over. And there you go, like that. That holds in pretty well. It's quite firm in there, and of course you can use the other tricks I showed you to keep it from slipping at all. This has the nice benefit that it still sits pretty nicely this way, but of course these wires are still blocking some of the thrust. So you can guess what's coming next. When I had it set up this way, what I would actually do is rotate 90 degrees like this. I say when I had it set up this way, I would still fly it this way, but those components are also broken and in need of replacement. I keep moving components around between different builds. I'm not very nice to my gear, so I tend to have problems with that. You might tip over on takeoff, but once you're up in the air, it works just fine and perfectly clean as the frame will allow anyway, clean airflow through there. And the last frame I'm going to talk about today is the Beta65 Pro frame. This is a 1S build, but that's the 65 Pro frame. And it's one that I haven't heard people consider for a 2S whoop. So, and I haven't built it, but I'm just going to put the idea out there. This is the frame right here. And it's designed for 603 motors, but it can also hold those 802 motors. And it's also 65 millimeter. It is lighter than the 65X frame, but it's also less durable, so that's a trade-off that you would have to consider. The problem with using the Beta FPV components for this is that when this goes down into here, it seems like it can almost go in, but it doesn't quite push down far enough because of these walls right here. So it can kind of tilt on one side or push down on the other side. Now, you could cut away some of the material and push it down further, maybe, but I think that would weaken the structure of the frame in a bad way. So I don't think this is a great option for the Beta FPV 2S stack. But, of course, if you had that Crazy Bee Pro flight controller, the one in the Mobula 7, that's just a regular Whoop flight controller shape, and you could put that on here, no problem. So how would you mount the batteries on a frame like that? Well, here you've got the 1S battery tray, and I would just do the same thing. I would just cut the bottom of this tray and open it up. And the reason is because a 1S battery tray happens to be, I don't know if you can see like that, or if I go like this, a 1S battery tray happens to be exactly the right width for a 300 milliamp hour 2-cell battery if you rotate it 90 degrees, and like we just showed, rotating 90 degrees is something I would probably do anyway. And as long as you have that all-in-one flight controller ESC board, there should still be room underneath to run your strap. You might take away the space that was going to go to the receiver, but you just do the same thing on all the other builds and move the receiver up. So, has anyone actually built a 2S Whoop out of this frame? I'd love to see it. That would be pretty cool.
So there you go. Hopefully you can see that you've actually got a bunch of options about how you might go about powering your 2S micro drones. There's lots of batteries out there, at least if you're willing to do a little bit of work. And of course there's even more batteries than I can show you. I know China Hobbyline makes a 2-cell battery, and my LiPo makes 2-cell batteries. I've heard good things about those, but I don't have any to show you. And of course there's more coming down the pipe all the time, more frames, more mounting solutions. So let me know what works for you. What do you use? How do you mount it? What do you think? You can leave your comments down below or on Facebook. The 2S Power Whoop group is another good place to talk about that. I hope this is helpful. I'll see you around. Happy flying.